الله أكبر
Inshallah, that was a beautiful talk, mashallah. Now our next guest, inshallah, we have Dr. Jihad Saafir, who will be talking about the transformation of Malcolm X and his change of stages in life. A little bit about Jihad Saafir, although I don't think he needs an introduction, mashallah. He's doing a lot of great work down in Southeast LA, inshallah. We really need to appreciate that. Dr. Saafir earned a Master's of Arts in Islamic Studies and Leadership from Bayan, and then completed his PhD at Fairmount School of Theology in Practical Theology. He is a resident Imam and founding executive director of Islah Academy, a K-8 Islamic private school based in LA, Los Angeles, California. In 2018, Imam Jihad was awarded with the prestigious award KCPT Local Heroes Award and South Coast Interfaith Council. The South Coast Interfaith Council recognized Dr. Saafir as its 2022 Leader of the Year, Faith Leader of the Year. MashaAllah. Without further ado, we'll invite Dr. Jihad Saafir to the stage.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير المرسلين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Right now, I wish I was the first speaker. I put it down. I can't follow that. When I come to spaces like this, I make sure that I give some of myself. You know, it's important that we're able to build relations with each other. We have to know each other's narrative and know each other's stories. You know, I grew up in a small storefront masjid. Shout out to all the storefront masajid all throughout the country. Putting it down. I grew up in a small storefront masjid known as Masjid Ibadullah. Alhamdulillah. That was my university coming up. And we're in the inner city, South Central Los Angeles. Right? South Central Los Angeles. If you don't know nothing about South Central Los Angeles, alhamdulillah. But one thing you need to know, you have a beautiful community thriving in South Central Los Angeles. So I'll never forget, I'm around 11, 12 years old. And right outside of the masjid was a phone booth. Some of y'all don't know nothing about a phone booth. So I'm using this phone booth. I don't know who I was calling, why I was on, I don't recall that part. But I'll never forget a young brother, Black American, like myself, who could perhaps pass even as my brother, came up to me while I'm on this phone booth, and he asked me, "Where are you from?" And that doesn't mean, in LA, that does not mean your place of origin. That means, which gang do you represent? Which gang are you connected to? And myself being nervous at that moment, not knowing what to do. Further down the street, the popos hit the corner. Alhamdulillah for the popos on that day. And before seeing the police, he lifted up his shirt and he had a gun. He had a gun. Not knowing what to do, he left me alone. I'll never forget, I went to my mother, and I told my mother what happened. My mother is a strong Muslim woman. As a matter of fact, her name is Muslima. Alhamdulillah, may Allah have utmost mercy on my mother. Say Ameen. Ameen. My mother says, next time that happens, you tell them you're Muslim. Tell them you're Muslim. Allow me to realize the legacy that has been put down before I touch this earth. The struggle, the striving my father, mother, uncles, aunties had to go through for me to say La ilaha illallah. She's saying take full advantage of that. You have a set that's bigger than any Bloods or Crip gang. You're Muslim. And to myself, Mama, this ain't gonna work. This ain't gonna work. So a few days later, I'm in one of the stores not too far from that phone booth, from that payphone. And I see this young, victimized, black male in front of me, again, asking me, where are you from? And I took my mother's advice, and I said, I'm Muslim. And he left me alone. Alhamdulillah. And that really, it indicates the struggle of my aunties and uncles, where they paved the way for myself to also be an imam today in the inner city. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, قُلْ لَنْ يُصِيبَنَا إِلَّا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَنَا هُوَ مَوْلَانَا وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, nothing shall ever happen to us except what Allah has written for us. And He is our protector. And upon Allah, let the believers put their trust. And when we look at the life of individuals such as Malcolm and the struggles that he had to go through, for us to say La ilaha illallah, we surely testify that Allah is Al-Hakim. And we have to have more trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah takes us from stage to stage. The stage prior, supporting the stage that will follow. Everything that occurs in life supports and sets you up for the stage that will follow. And we see this in the life of Malcolm. That we have a life that consists of gain and loss. That the feature of Maulana, our protector, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most wise in regards to what He's going to take away and also what He's going to give. And we have before us the legacy of Malcolm, one of the most important symbols in American history, the most important symbol in American Islamic history, one of the most courageous legacies, one of the most courageous leaders in the history of America. And I want to examine with you all the wisdom of Allah and the things that Allah has given to Malcolm and the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken away from Malcolm. We see Malcolm came into this world in what I would call, this is pre-racialization. He was being racialized even in the womb of his mother. When the Ku Klux Klan visited his home when he's in the womb of his mother, asking for his father, going around his home, breaking the windows, being racialized before even touching the earth, being racialized by this world marred with racism. We see that Malcolm came into this world May 19th, 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska. And what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills is the best. And his impact in allowing Malcolm to be born to this particular world, we are truly blessed by the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But again, he's born into a world marred by discrimination and racism. As we know, where we're standing, right, at this moment can be the land that was removed from the native people, from those who came before us. And we have to acknowledge that people have had to undergo and endure suffering in order for us to be here. And we see, for example, the racism that Malcolm had to undergo. When he was 4, moving away with his family, they moved to Lansing, Michigan. And his white neighbors took legal action to evict him from their home that they owned. And the judge said the property was for whites only. Like imagine having property, this property, there's a spatial restriction based on how a person looks, their physical features, that this land is not your land. This land is for white people only. Malcolm born into a world marred by racism. And we see that they took legal action. And of course, it went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled that what they were doing was legal. They were evicting them from their own home, and they said, this is legal. This is state-sanctioned violence. State-sanctioned violence. And we see that that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what He decrees, Allah decrees everything. But we see Malcolm being prepared for his future role and having to experience this racism and discrimination. Malcolm's life was a university preparing him to impact us today. Eventually that home being burnt down. His father, he's a product of a father unwilling to apologize about who he was and having a mother. You know, his mother, Louise Little, a true soldier for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a true soldier for justice. Reverend Earl Little, a true soldier for justice. Him being a prick in the side of white people during that time and annoying them and them absolutely hating his presence, but he wasn't willing to move. So they burnt the house down. Not only burnt the house down, they arrested his father and blamed his father for burning his own house down. What type of America is that? That we see that the lands that we are standing upon, what has taken place, the injustice that has taken place because of that. But we see in the Quran is so beautiful in bringing us back to perspective. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَلِيُبْلِيَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ مِنْهُ بَلَاءً حَسَنًا. That Allah says that He might test the believers with a beautiful test. That perhaps this is a beautiful test. How many of us have been influenced by the autobiography of Malcolm X? The tests that he was going through are beautiful tests to shape and mold us, to prepare us to fight against injustice, alone following the legacy of Malcolm. And we see that what racism does to an individual's psychological state. We have Malcolm's mother being set up for a psychological failure. The father being killed, and she wasn't even able to collect insurance money in regards to her husband being killed, so she's left there all by herself, to fend by herself with 8 children. And of course, this would lead to her psychological demise. The courts eventually ruled that she was insane and put her in a mental hospital. Again, this occurrence setting Malcolm up for his future message, for his future messaging. That Malcolm, when he came to Los Angeles, a very dear moment, even for myself historically, he came to Los Angeles in his speech. He said the most disrespected person in America is the black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the black woman. The most neglected person in America is the black woman. And he emphatically said, we will kill you over our women. My sisters, do you all feel that with the protection with your Muslim brothers these days? You don't have to answer. Brothers, they said yes, they do. That's for another session.
Depends on where I'm at.
Now, but we look at the hallmarks in the life, the hallmarks of favor, of Allah's favor in the life of Malcolm. Now, Malcolm, he is undergoing the pattern that we also see with the Anbiya, the most righteous who came before him. The pattern of removing the parents and leaving the servant to totally rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his parents removed. His father dying before him even being born, and then also his mother passing away. What happened to the parents of Musa, removed from his life? Ibrahim had to migrate away from his parents, away from father and mother, right? And Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam separated from his parents. This is just a hallmark of Allah's favor. When someone approaches and saying, I'm having trouble in the family, I don't know my father, I don't know my mother, perhaps that individual is being favored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we see that Malcolm being favored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah mentions in the Quran, وَأَلْقَيْتُ عَلَيْكَ مَحَبَّةً مِنِّي وَلِتُسْنَعَ عَلَىٰ عَيْنِي. He says, and I bestowed, speaking about Musa, I bestowed upon you love from me. If your parents aren't there, I'm there to love you, right? That you may be brought up under my eyes. Your parents aren't raising you, I'm raising you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at this point where Malcolm is like Musa placed in the sea, right? Malcolm placed in the foster care system. And who was there to love Malcolm? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who was now there to raise Malcolm was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we see Malcolm, he's exposed, he's around white families. He's going to eventually have to approach white America. Allah knows best where the best place Malcolm should be at to prepare him for his future mission. He placed them around white people in white schools, in the white educational system, because he knew he would have to confront white America in his future. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the author of this, and Allah is the best to author any of our narratives. That we see that Malcolm became fully racialized. You know, you fully racialize when you block from actualizing your dreams and goals. You become fully racialized. Malcolm wanted to be a lawyer. His teacher said, no, black people, Negroes are better with their hands. They should look for industries in regards to using their hands. Blocking the imagination of Malcolm. Him now not motivated to continue in school. And we see in this day the school to prison pipeline where young black males, their dreams and aspirations and their goals are torn down in the classroom, right there in the classroom like Malcolm. And we're wondering why they end up opting out and breaking away from that particular environment. So Malcolm, there to now think for himself, he ended up moving with his sister, Ella. It's nothing like having a righteous sister. Nothing like having a righteous sister. May Allah have mercy on all of our righteous sisters. Say Ameen. Ameen. Now we see that this is following a pattern. This is a hallmark of Allah's favor. Blessing you with a righteous sister to remind you. Right? So we have Sarah was actually the sister of Ibrahim. Right? You have also Maryam, or also some call her Kulthum. She was the sister of Musa. The sister of Musa reunited Musa with his mother, right? Opened the door for his mother to come in. Nothing like having a righteous sister. Fatima, the sister of Umar bin al-Khattab, was also his gateway to converting into Islam. It's nothing like having a beautiful righteous sister. And Ella was one of those who ended up paving the way for even Malcolm to go and visit the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The gift of Ella, the righteous sister. But it was in that environment that Malcolm began to transition into red. You're talking about Detroit red and Harlem red, donning the zoot suit with the conch, right? Y'all don't know anything about conchs? Good, right? The 4-inch brim hat, the reefer, right? The liquor bottle. And he had a white girl named Sophia. And as they say, everyone loves Sophia, right? As they say, right? So here Malcolm was exposed to pimping, right? He was exposed to the numbers games, peddling dope, right? Thievery and armed robbery. He was, again, being raised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was here, this was his university. Because he would eventually have to talk and address this particular audience And he had to learn their language first before he's able to be effective with the thief, right? The Nation of Islam is better than the AA program, right? Because it has individuals like Malcolm who was in the thick of things, right? Who was able to learn the language and began to speak to the people in the language that they understood. One moment that they describe is that Malcolm, he's walking with another civil rights leader who doesn't have the training like Malcolm. And one of an individual, a hustler, came to talk to both of them, and the civil rights leader had no idea what the guy was talking about. And Malcolm became a translator right there on the spot for the guy to understand this is the language of the people in regards coming from certain environments. We see all these hallmarks of Allah's favor. Another hallmark of Allah's favor is that Malcolm being placed in prison, but some of the best amongst us was also placed in prison. Yusuf alayhi salam, don't count any of our brothers and sisters out who have been placed in prison. May Allah free those who are placed in prison. Say Ameen. 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 But we see that Malcolm, he continued to use drugs, drink alcohol right there in the prison system. Those same things are visible right there and accessible right there in the prison system. But we see that Malcolm, he came to a point, he transitioned from red. Now in the prison, he's known as Satan, right? And this is a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For me, I'm grateful to grow up in the environment that I grew up in. I prayed next to individuals who are former kingpins and former drug leaders and former gang leaders. And I would never trade in that experience for nothing, because I saw Islam transform people. And we see Malcolm in an environment and we watch his transformation, going from Satan. And now think about it. Malcolm went to the best schools in the foster care system. He was top of his class. He was excellent at reading and comprehension, right? He came into the prison system with a skill. Allah knows best. Allah knows best that he went to the best schools. Now he's in a prison system by himself around the library. And now Malcolm is reading the likes of Socrates, right? Nietzsche, Spinoza, some of the philosophers and authors of racism. Malcolm, because of his training, is able to now dissect them. That every phase that we go through in life prepares us for the phase that's going to follow. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Hakim. Now we have in prison, I want to point out that he was not ignored in prison. Don't ignore the brothers and sisters in prison. They need people to visit them. They need people to write them, right? Who was writing Malcolm when he was in prison? Elijah Muhammad was writing Malcolm when he was in prison. And this is why he was so enamored when he finally met him in person. He said, this is the individual who never counted me out. He continued to write me. When I was in prison, everyone turned their back on me. Elijah Muhammad treated me like his own son. For those who criticize Elijah Muhammad, where were you at when Malcolm was locked up in prison? Where was you at when Malcolm needed you the most? Or Imam Jamil, right? These individuals need us. They need us not to ignore them. And we see that Malcolm, not being ignored, he came out to the embrace of the Nation of Islam. And I'm not ashamed to say, my father, James 75X. That means there were 74 Jameses before he became 75X. I was going through a period where I was ashamed of that history. No, I'm a product of that. And I'm not ashamed of it. This is the beautiful Allah. People may not understand it, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows life to unfold in stages and phases. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best to author any of our narratives. That we see that Malcolm was able to contribute to the growth of the Nation of Islam, which went from a little bit over 1,000 members to upward to 30,000 members, because of also the influence and the hard work of Malcolm. Like Malcolm, he wanted to get rid of our inferiority complex. I'm tired of being in the masjid and someone comes in who's not African American and we assume that they belong in regards to leading the salah. That Malcolm was there to say, who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin? This is Malcolm building up his people, saying you are not inferior. As a matter of fact, when you are able to actualize your full potential, when racism is no longer blocking you, you will rise up and meet the heights and have what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has waiting on you. So we have Malcolm. He was outspoken in mainstream media against the police, right? The police brutality, police violence, right? Putting his life on the line to demand justice. Malcolm let us know about what's taking place even in the media. He says, if you're not careful, the newspaper will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. And what do we have now? How influenced even are the Muslims? I hear some of the Muslims even using some of the talking points about things they have no idea of. And Malcolm, he let us know, he reminded us to be careful of the media. So in closing, Malcolm, he transitioned from local leader to world leader. Malcolm made attempts to internationalize the black struggle. This is genius. Being able to internationalize the black struggle. Transitioning it from a civil rights issue to what? Human rights. Human rights. Letting the world know what the black man and woman were having to endure in regards to racism right here in beloved America. And we see that this became a threat to the Johnson administration. Now, Malcolm, he was going around, he eventually got pledges of support from 8 African nations to support. He was in talks with the Algerian ambassador, Chinese ambassador, Nigerian ambassador, Mali ambassador, right? He had the Nigerian High Commission, right? Cuban ambassador, right? He was in talks with those in Egypt. They had a Malcolm X committee right there in Ghana. This is the individual that the world counted out. Don't count none of our brothers and sisters out. I'm proud to say one of our top contributors and a board member for my organization is formerly incarcerated. And we have other people who, over the prison reentry, in regards to the reentry program, formerly incarcerated. There's places where in order to qualify for a job, you have to be incarcerated. You have to have once been incarcerated. This is the Muslims should have that type of embrace, that we have enough basira to see that this individual, we don't throw these individuals away. No. We never know. They may become a Malcolm. They may be able to influence the world in such a way that individuals have no idea. And this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what I would say in closing, I want to end off on this, is that Malcolm, when he was younger, after becoming red in Detroit red and Harlem red, he went back to Lansing, Michigan with his zoot suit on, with his comb in his hair, and his 4-inch brim hat. And his colors were so loud that someone was driving past and they hit the car right in front of him. This is the Malcolm effect. Malcolm has always garnered our attention. When Malcolm speaks, when Malcolm is present in regards to his message, he has always caused us to pay attention and realize that it was Malcolm. I'm grateful, I'm in debt. Because Malcolm is the individual who taught me that being a Muslim in America is being in service to the voiceless. And also, in America, we have to realize that some people are at the stage of Malcolm Little. Some people are Detroit red and Harlem red. I know a few Harlem reds. Some people are at the stage of Satan. Don't we know a few Satans? And some people are at the stage of Malcolm X. Well, what we know, Allah is in control of all of this. And Allah can move that person from being red to Satan, to Malcolm X, to Malik, Shabazz, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bring us up. We don't count no one out, knowing that that person can become Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have utmost mercy upon all of us. And in closing, free Imam Jamil.
Allah